Hey, welcome to the Cultivate Church Planting Podcast. And before we get started, I want to take a minute to invite you to the upcoming CGN International Ministry Conference. This is June 22nd to 25th, and it's a gathering designed specifically for church leaders and their ministry teams to connect, collaborate, and grow together in a community of like-minded leaders. This year, we're going to have Alistair Begg as one of our main session teachers, along with a lot of other guests, Monday the 22nd to the 25th in Temecula, California at Reliance Church, Pastor Ted Leavenworth. I hope you can all join us there. For more information, visit conference.calvarychapel.com. All right, let's get into the episode. All right, welcome to the Cultivate Church Planting Podcast, and I've got a great episode today. I'm with Aaron Smith. Pastor Aaron is here in Florida, which is where I also am, and I've been meaning to do this for a long, long time, and that is to drive down to, do you call this Punta Gorda?
We're in Port Charlotte now.
Port Charlotte, okay, So Port Charlotte, and to drive down here and see the ministry, because I think I met Aaron when we first, I think we met maybe a year after I moved here.
Yeah, so it would have been maybe 2 years ago, almost.
Yeah, about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And Aaron is a church planter extraordinaire. Is a church planter extraordinaire. And he has planted this church, and you were sent out. So this is the coolest story, and I'm excited for you guys to listen to this this episode, because Aaron was sent out from a church in Mexico.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And Mike Vincent, who has been on the podcast before and has an extraordinary church planting school and ministry, and has done an excellent job sending out guys, and mostly into Mexico. But what I love is church planters being sent to the United States to plant.
Yes.
Because guess what? We need Bible teaching churches in the United States.
Yes. I was originally sent to be a missionary in Mexico. Mexico sent me back, so they need you back there.
They sent you back. Yeah. So you may have detected from the accent that Aaron is not originally from Mexico, but you were a missionary there for a little while. How long were you there?
Only 1 year.
Only 1 year.
Yeah, 1 year. It was supposed to be at least 2, but it ended up just being 1.
Okay. And then got sent out back. And you're from Florida originally, or no?
No, I'm originally from Washington State.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yep. I was raised in Washington State.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what
I'm in his office. He's got a Seattle Seahawks helmet. So sorry for their loss in the,
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of them, so
Which one?
I've had more than one opportunity to cope.
Exactly. Okay, Washington State, and then I know we've talked about this all before. Aaron, tell me about how you got to Florida and what prompted you to plant a church here.
So originally, when my wife and I, we were sent out of Calvary Chapel, Olympia. We were sent down to Mexico as missionaries, and the idea at that time, I knew I was going to plant a church. I didn't know where. And the idea at the time was we were probably going to plant a church in Mexico. That's kind of where my mind went. That's what I assumed the Lord was doing as he was leading us down there.
Yeah.
While down there, Pastor Mike sort of took me under his wing, began to spend a lot of time in discipleship and training with me, and he began the process really for me of explaining kind of how you get places, how does it work? That was my biggest question, is how do you know when the Lord is sending you somewhere?
Yeah.
And so his first statement to me was to pray for the where and the when. And so we began doing that immediately. And of course, in addition to that, I'm looking at all these places in Mexico that, of course, they need a Calvary Chapel. I was looking at Mazatlan and Cancun and, all these beautiful beach towns. And I thought there were a lot of Americans there, and it made sense.
Yeah, we met up in Mazatlan with Pastor Tony Carranza.
Yep.
And a great ministry and work there.
So fun fact, that was the first place that I thought I was going. and then Tony. So I remind him of that every time. Yeah, Tony, you're here. Anyway, so we began to pray for the where and the when. one of the interesting things that was happening is prior to being sent to Mexico, I was a fireman. I had injured my shoulder and I had a surgery, and the recovery hadn't gone that well. And at that time, they were going to medically retire me.
Okay.
And so I was looking, nothing drives you to your knees like desperation.
Yeah.
Right. And I'd always wanted to be full-time in the ministry. At the time I was a part-time youth pastor, full-time fireman.
Oh, wow.
And so when I began to pray about where and when to go, after my surgery, I had some time off of work. My father-in-law had just retired from his job in Minnesota and had moved down here to Inglewood and invited us to go down. At a time I said I didn't want to come because my shoulder was hurt and I didn't want to get on a plane and fly across the country. And in Washington, this was about in January in Washington, he says, well, you can be miserable in Washington or you can be miserable on the beach down here in Florida. And I said, well, I come down there. And that was really the first time the Lord spoke to me about where to go. While I was here, I met a Calvary Chapel pastor of Calvary Venice. Bob is his name.
Yep. Okay.
And Pastor Bob told me at the time that I ought to think about planting a church in Punta Gorda. Now, at that time in my life, never considered planting a church.
It has a Spanish name too.
It
Punta
does.
Gorda, so it's like...
And that was part of the confirmation.
Yeah, it probably was it really?
Kind of.
Yeah, okay.
Sort of. It was to other people in Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. You can tell them we're planting in Punta Gorda. They're like, what part of Mexico?
So
Florida.
He had said it to me at the time. Well, fast forward then to when I'm in Mexico and I'm with Pastor Mike, we had to do an exercise where he just, he gives you a few minutes and you write down, okay, this is your church planting dream. Where would you go? When would it start? What would it look like? What's it going to look like in 3 years and 5 years? And as I sat to put my pen to paper, I just drew a complete blank. I could not think of anywhere to go, but I had to write something down. He said, it doesn't matter. Just write something down. All that came up was Pastor Bob's face saying, you ought to plant a church in Punta Gorda. Okay, whatever. So I wrote it down and I wrote this whole dream out for what it would look like and where we'd start and the whole bit. And I got through that, forgot about it. Later on, we were continuing to pray for where and the when. And my wife had gone to a pastor's wives conference in California with some of the other pastor's wives from Mexico. And while she was there, she bumped into a woman in the bookstore. There's about 500 women there, but she bumped into a woman. They quickly became friends, and they started talking about where they felt like the Lord was leading them. And my wife said, well, we feel like we're being called to church plant. We're not sure where. And this woman said, well, I'm from Florida. And she says, well, that's one of the places we're thinking about. And then she says, well, we feel like we're being called to a place called Punta Gorda. So the woman said, well, it just so happens I know all about Punta Gorda. My husband is Jim Gallagher, and they're Calvary Chapel, Vero Beach.
Oh, man, of all the people to meet. And Jim has a great ministry over on the east coast of Florida.
And they had been here several times doing mission work for the hurricane cleanup in 2004. So while she was having that conversation, I was having a conversation in Mexico with my pastor, Mike, and telling him about this place, Punta Gorda, Florida, that I felt like. And so after a conversation, he felt just led to say to me that he says, well, I feel 100% the Lord is calling you there.
Wow.
And so when God confirms it for you, which I believe he will, he says, you still need God to confirm it, but I believe that's where you're going to go.
Yeah. And that's big coming from him because he has a big heart for Mexico, like to see the Mexico reach. So to send someone outside of Mexico, that's, it's the Lord.
So I prayed for it that night. And I kind of reached that point. I'm like, well, what else do I need to hear? I felt peace in my heart about it. I felt excited about Florida, even though I didn't know anybody here. I'd never been to Punta Gorda before in my life. But at that moment, I thought, man, I really feel like the Lord is calling me. So when I called my wife that night to say, hey, I really think the Lord's calling us to Punta Gorda, she says, well, I know we're going to church plant. And I said, well, how do you know? And then she shared the whole story. So literally we came together at the same time and said, okay, God is calling us here.
No coincidences in the kingdom. That's good.
That's how we got here.
That's awesome. And how long ago was that?
That was about 9 years ago, a little over 9 years ago.
And so the church has been around for about 9 years?
We just celebrated 8 years last October. So we're a little over 8 years now.
Okay. And for our listeners, and this is why I love hanging out with church planters and doing this podcast, is because I get to hear stories like Aaron's. And I'm here at the church building that you just recently got a year ago. So you started off did you start at your former place?
Yeah.
So they started and you had about 5 acres there of mostly just land and then a building on it with some portable units for children's ministry.
It was a church. Yeah, there was a church there to begin with.
All right.
Yeah.
And these guys outgrew that and are in this beautiful church building. I got jealous when I came here. I think he was walking around showing me the property, and it's got the a playground outside and the outdoor kitchen with a barbecue grill for the it's just a beautiful sanctuary. So this is really a cool story because I see God blessing this church. I mean, it's not just the numbers, although there's just a lot of people coming to the church here. But God is blessing it. But tell us a little bit about how you got into this building and kind of the significance of that. And
So we got into this building almost exactly the same way we got into our first building, exactly 7 years to the day apart.
Okay.
When we first came to Florida, one of my friends who was a pastor in Mexico, his name is Frank Espinoza. He was pretty good with social media, and I am not good with anything connected to technology whatsoever.
No, when we first started, Aaron said that he could do, what was it, fax and
rotary
phone and fax.
Answering machines. That's
answering machine. No, you didn't say fax because I was like, I don't know how to run a fax machine.
Fax is a little too complicated for me.
That's beyond my expertise.
Yeah.
I can do coding and everything. No fax.
No. So he was putting out social media. Evidently, you could advertise to a specific area.
Okay.
So he was making advertisements, letting people know, and people were commenting. Praise God, we're glad you're coming here, and we had a lot of very nice things to say. People were saying, but there was one lady that got on there and asked if we had a place to meet yet, and we said no, and she says, well, we have a church in need of a pastor, and maybe we could work something out. So when I heard that, I thought to myself, man, who goes on Facebook looking for a pastor, right? Like I want nothing to do with this. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I don't think I'm here to plant the church, and I don't,
exactly.
So ultimately what we found out is that woman knew all about Calvary Chapel. They had helped plant a church that didn't make it. They they had 5 acres. It was gifted to them. They built a beautiful church building in 2004.
Was it a Calvary Chapel that planted?
No, it was an independent Pentecostal church.
Okay.
Yeah, very open to the gifts of the Spirit. They were very open to that. They were beautiful people. We loved them, but they were down to about 9 people.
Okay. 9 beautiful people.
And so when we came there, they started letting us use the building just to use it because nobody was using it. And they were actually out of money. They only owed about $75,000, and they were down to 9 people, but they couldn't make their payment anymore. Okay. So if nothing changed, it was going back to the bank. So we started using it, and as God was bringing people to the church over the next 6 weeks or so, they saw God's blessing. They asked me to teach their services, and about 3 weeks in, they just said, "Here's the keys, here's the deed."
Yeah.
And it really did happen that simply.
Okay. Wow.
So they gave us that building, and of course, we never bought it. We only been in church for 2 months, so I'd never bought a church before. The money, God provided a lawyer, a commercial real estate guy that I happened to move next to. So we got that building 7 years later. This particular building we're in here was a Presbyterian church, and nearly the same story. They were down to this was quite a bit of building and property to maintain. Yeah. They were down to around 50 people, which for this size of place was pretty.
And for perspective, the sanctuary seats like what, about 800? You said
currently, right, the way it's set up. Yeah. I think they told me it can go up to 1250. Okay. Although I don't know if we can get.
But they had the pews and everything. I went and looked at it, and Aaron and them did a beautiful remodel, and it's got the rock in the back, and it's got because Rock Calvary Chapel, and it's got the dove, and all the pews are out. Yep. Which
they're actually in Haiti.
Oh, they're in Haiti.
Into a Haitian church. Out. Yeah.
And they've got the nice comfy chairs. Yes. We got to have comfy chairs in America. We're
the brain can only take what the butt can endure. That's a Chuck Smithism.
Yeah, that's a Chuck Smithism. Yeah. And so for perspective, I mean, that's what they were kind of working with in this dwindling congregation.
Yeah.
But that's amazing that. Because this happens a lot of times, and we even talked to funny enough, the Presbyterian Church in Bradenton, which is where we are. For those listening, it's about an hour north. It's actually exactly an hour from downtown Bradenton to the church building here.
Okay.
So now I know.
Now we know.
And we talked to the Presbyterian church there, and they, same thing, dwindling down. And, you know, we won't go into the reasons for that or whatever, but, you know, let's just say churches that stick to the word, teaching verse by verse through the Bible, are having success. And that's kind of, we'll leave it at that. It's like we see God blessing, as he's always done, the teaching of his word. And so they said, we're dwindling down. So how did you, because what I was going to say is, when you're dealing with denominational churches, you're not just dealing with the church, you're dealing with the structure.
So what I understood, at least the way they explained it to me, was there was 3 yeses that needed to take place.
Okay.
There was the Presbyterian church leadership, the elder board. There was the presbytery, which is over an area, and then there was the congregation they get a vote to. And it has to be 100%.
Really?
Or at least very close to that. If
not, all 3 have to all be in the same page.
Which would have been easier to part the Red Sea. Believe me, it was quite the process, it was really fascinating. You know, for us, the building had been damaged in the hurricane, and you know, I think probably one of the hardest things I would imagine for a lot of these churches is, they know what the former glory was. They had pictures all over the church of what it used to be.
That's it.
Right?
Yep, exactly.
And they're hoping and they're praying that God is going to redo what they have seen in times past. And it's hard for them when that doesn't happen. But for here, the hurricane had damaged the building to a point where they knew they were more afraid of watching the building crumble to nothing and amounting to nothing than they were of the future of what it looked like if they sold it. So they had a few other churches that had come in and offered to buy it. But most everybody wanted to do a clean break. We'll purchase it for this much and you guys need to find somewhere else to go. And that was what made our situation a little different. Yeah. Whereas we kind of took compassion on them and we said,
imagine that, a church taking compassion.
Yeah. And so, you know, we shared with them that we felt as though they were our spiritual grandparents. And as with any family.
You showed honor to them as
essentially. Yeah. With any family, there are family members you don't agree with, you know, theologically, certain topics maybe you don't broach.
I've got a few crazy aunts and uncles out there that, you know, you love them, but.
Yeah. And so, but we honored them. We honored them as our family.
Yes.
And we also, you know, really hoped that they would come and join us, which has happened to a point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause what you do now is you share a little piece of the property that they can still meet in. Was it formerly like the fellowship hall or the chapel area?
Yeah, it was a fellowship hall and a garage, and it was really important to them that they'd be able to keep their food bank going.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have built out the garage for them into their food bank, and then the rest of it is now a sanctuary for them.
Okay.
Which was the old fellowship hall, and they made offices. Yeah. Well, actually, we did it. We built the whole thing out for them, but we made offices for them and a little children's ministry. Yeah. Which was kind of token. They don't really have any. Every once in a while, they have like grandkids come.
Yeah, but, and it's just, man, it's sad in a way, but it also emphasizes the need to say, how does God want to reach this generation? How does God want to, like, to always, like, you and I are pretty young guys, Aaron. I would say. How old are you?
I'm 46.
46. I'm 46.
Okay.
When's your birthday? December
25th.
Okay, so I'm older than you. My birthday is in February 28th, this month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, end of the month. Yeah, so back to my point, we're fairly young guys. But even now, we got to start thinking about how are we passing it on to the next generation and doing so with biblical integrity and faithfulness, while at the same time seeing that this next generation of people are getting reached. So because I love the building, and and a lot of church planners that listen to this, they're interested in like the details of like, how did that happen? How did you get that to work out with the church there and share that? And I think one key thing that you said is having compassion and not just coming in saying, hey, we're doing it the right way. You guys need to get out. Let us take over now.
Right.
But saying, all right, we're going to show some honor here as family and, you know, continue to meet here, and then we'll continue. Mm-hmm. And they were okay with that. They accepted that.
They were shocked
proposal.
at that.
Okay.
They honestly, and that was actually one of the biggest blessings to be a part of. Was we didn't, we recognize, hey, there's a business aspect to this deal that's going to happen. There's a negotiation. There are things that are going in. That's a fact of life. There's
money involved. There's business involved.
Fact of life. But we're going to set that on this table, and we're going to say, but there's also the you part of this, and we're not as interested in your building as we are with you.
Yeah, that's
and
huge.
So we want to also come alongside of you and decide what's your next step, because that was our biggest fear. It was, well, we got to leave this building. Then where do we go?
Yeah.
So, and there's two sides to that,
because a lot of them, if they're, how long has the church been here? Is probably
it's been here since, a good, I think it was the 30s or 40s where it was initially started. 74 was the major remodel.
Yeah.
So
you got people that if they were kids, they were in the kids ministry, they're in their 60s, 70s.
We have people come by here all the time, say, hey, I got married in that church, in the 80s or 90s.
So for them to think about, just everything's gone and we're out, that's really tough.
Pretty hard. Yeah. And so a lot of them have been members for a long time. And so they have seen this place in its glory. Yeah.
That's so good to be able to partner like that, because surprisingly, a lot of church planters are partnering with older congregations, older church buildings, and either doing like a share thing where, hey, you meet on Sunday morning at this time, we'll meet at this time, or we'll meet on Sunday nights. And it works really well. I mean, for our listeners, if you're looking for a place, go talk to the other churches in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Hey, guess what? It just it depends on which ones they are, but at the very least, you have a spiritual heritage and you can kind of join together in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, what I wanted to jump to is that training the next generation, because I feel like this is where what you and Mike Vincent and some of the others in your group, your gang, I'll call it your gang.
My gang. I like that.
We use the word tribe a lot. Let's use the word gang.
Gang, all right, we'll go gang. Yeah.
This is where I think you guys really shine, and that is not just limiting the ministry to what you're doing right here and now in the church, but also passing it on, sending out. You said something before we started recording here, Aaron, that you're sending out someone from your church, and I don't know all the public knowledge of this or whatever, but you said, he's a key guy, but we're sending out our best.
Yeah.
We always send out our best.
Right.
And that's huge when you talk about outflow of ministry. And,
so when we moved over to this building, we owned the other campus outright. And the question was, what do we do with it now?
Yeah.
And so as we came up with ideas, I hate to say this as a pastor, but we kind of had this as like, well, what does God want to do with this place?
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Well,
it's actually his, maybe we should ask him. Yeah. I have a lot of great ideas, God, for what you can do for your building.
Yeah, exactly. Let me tell you what
maybe
we
should include him. So we prayed about it. One of our guys, our assistant pastors, Dave Hole, he and his wife moved down here from Bill Goodrich's church, Horizon, up in Indiana.
Okay, yeah.
And he was a big part of they have Cultivate Chapel University up there. They've got their own Bible college, and they've really done some really great work there. Around that same time, I met and became friends with Gerald Hagerman, who's out at Calvary Chapel, Joshua Springs.
Okay.
And they have their Bible college out there, which is fantastic. CBI, Calvary Bible Institute.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I don't know him personally, but yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
They took over I think it was a retirement home.
Oh, wow.
And they completely converted it. But I mean, it was perfectly set up.
We're going to do the opposite from retire here.
Exactly. It's just perfectly set up. Each room was set up to be its own apartment with a central kitchen.
And, that's a good idea.
They have done a beautiful job with that. And they can house about 50 or 60 kids.
Okay. That's a good idea. I never thought about that. Like retirement communities.
Oh, yeah.
You've got because you're right. They're set up for that, and they've got the public areas.
Perfectly set up for it. Yeah, perfectly. So they've done a fantastic job with it. So we have been working with Calvary Horizon, and they have sent us so much materials. I mean, they have given us everything we've asked for. They've allowed us access into all of their programs so that we can see how they've worked it.
Do they do like online stuff too that you can access, or is it mostly just for your to help get started?
I wasn't as interested in that portion of it just because we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But we we just wanted to see how their operations went. What was their schedule? How did you get the word out? So we thought, well, we have all this campus, and
let's put it to use.
Yeah, and I mean, it's in Florida. I mean, it's just a beautiful place to come. So we knew a lot of kids. To back up one step, when the Bible college out in California, the big one that everybody knew of, that's no longer being used.
Yeah,
and so,
the Marietta campus.
Yeah,
Yep.
So things have moved around a little bit. Well, we thought, well, gosh, we have this wonderful, beautiful campus, and all the opportunity there. So we made the announcement. We just kind of went for it.
Yeah.
So it's been running now for they've completed one semester. They've just started their second. And it's rolling there, and the whole purpose behind it, honestly, and it's on all of the literature that we hand out, is to train up the next generation for the next great revival. And so,
is it like a 1-year school, 2-year school? 2 year. Okay.
Yeah. It's nearly the same format that the old Bible college used.
Okay.
Yeah, nearly the same. We've made some adjustments to suit us and our needs. But
is it live on campus, or do people live in the area and
live on campus?
Okay.
Yeah, we can take up to 14 students on campus.
Okay. And then people can take classes that are like if they go to your church, for example, they can come and take a class or two.
I believe we have just started opening that up. Okay. Yeah, for adults who can come who don't live here. But we are looking into more housing options as the college grows to be able to get the numbers up a little bit more.
Nice. Yeah, because I love that about Bible college is you go and live in a place and then you kind of immerse yourself in what you're doing at that time.
Right.
Because I taught we had a Bible college extension at Maranatha Chapel, and I worked there, and it was a CCBC extension there. And it was cool, it had night classes so people could come and, there were students and old and young. But there's just something cool about going and moving to a place and being part of a culture of students and that sort of thing.
And that environment, we're really that part. We're trying to catch those kids that are in that just graduated high school. What am I going to do with my life age? Right? Because we have, and not to go too far down this road, but the institution of universities that we have in America right now is working actively to undo what we're doing in the church, which is to disciple people and train them up in truth. And the university is trying to take all that away. Not all of them, of course. There are good universities out there. I'm very impressed with what Liberty University is doing, and some other Christian universities. But as a whole,
a lot of them aren't that great.
No, and we've all been brought up in this culture that you have to go to college in order to get a good job, and you got to go to a good school and all this kind of stuff. And so
it like defines your worth on what college you go to and what education you have.
Very much. And I just had this conversation with a very dear family that comes to our church. And I just said, well, if you're going to send them off to Rome, then don't be surprised when they come back Roman.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
And that was for them, the aha moment, like, yeah, you're right. Okay. Well, what do you want them to be? And that's not to say that there aren't programs out there that are great. If he wants to be a doctor, if he wants to be a lawyer, those are necessary parts of school that you have to go do.
Of course. You have to have that
But
education.
that's not what the culture is doing. The culture says go to school, get an education.
You don't even know what you're majoring in. It's kind of like you just go to go.
Yeah, and
you end up partying, and it's like, man, what am I paying for?
Yeah. You don't get it. Some people, they got to get it out of their system. No, you don't get anything out of your system. All you do is bring things into your system.
Get it out of your system. I hope you don't die or get addicted to drugs in the process.
Yeah.
Look at us. We're just so negative about university. Oh, well.
But every great solution has started off with a problem, right? So if you can identify the problem,
so Bible college, and what I say about Bible college, if you're talking about CCBC, CBI, Calvary University, obviously within Calvary Chapel, you can take a year or two and dedicate it to studying the Bible, even if you want to go on to be a doctor or whatever, and in a regular, state school or university. Right. And that's what we always encouraged our kids to do, because my daughter Liana was up at Twin Peaks this last semester, and it's just like, just go for a year, go for a season, get yourself away and study the word, get around those teachers and those students, and it's so beneficial.
Oh man, the foundation you build before going there is massive. Yeah.
Because then you go off to Rome as an undercover agent, and you'll go off to Rome and come back Constantine.
That would be awesome.
But then in addition, and this is what I was interested in, because we want to do something like this at our church, is School of Ministry. So this is within so the Bible college is kind of under your church umbrella,
Correct.
as it were, but it's a separate
Correct.
institution.
Yep.
And then you have a School of Ministry that you oversee.
That's my
personally.
baby.
Yeah.
That's my baby. Yep. That's it.
And Mike Vincent, who we've been talking about, has done that as well, but his is purely church planting.
Correct.
So for this podcast, it's like church planting podcast. Yeah, of course, we want something just church planting, but I'm more with you. We talked before the show again about discipleship, broadening kind of the emphasis to more than just church planters, but to that, discipleship in the Lord in ministry. So what do you do for the School of Ministry?
So for our School of Ministry, it has all been modeled after Jesus and the 12 disciples, or Paul with his disciples. Okay. So before, as I mentioned, my prior career I was a firefighter. Well, I retired out of training. And most of the time in police work, in firefighter work, military work, I mean, you don't do anything unless you're certified to do it. Yeah. I mean, you don't everything. And I mean, we have certifications for everything. That's the world that I lived in. When I came into the church as I got saved, there was none of that. It was, it was kind of like, hey, you seem like a nice guy. You run children's ministry next week.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Are you saved? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
You got a nice coat on. Yeah. Why don't you
He's got a Bible. Put him in.
I mean, it wasn't quite that, but I mean, it was very much like, well, how do I do this?
You need that. It's like.
Yeah. Well, and to some extent, that actually works well too. It has its place. But I did not come out of that world. I feel my comfort level with life is a lot more like, I want to be trained up. I want to know how to do something and then go do it and learn how to do it, sort of that way. Yeah. So that's what makes sense to me. And as I read the Gospels, I saw that. I saw that Jesus had 12 disciples. He was always teaching them. And when they didn't understand, he took them away privately and gave them the explanation.
Instructed them, yeah.
Right. And so he sent them out to do ministry 2 by 2. When they came back, he offered course corrections, especially the time he was up on the Mount of Transfiguration. He comes down with James, Peter, and Paul, James, John, and Peter. They came down, and their disciples were trying to cast a demon out of a young boy, and they couldn't. Remember that? And then, and so when they're looking at him and say, well, we tried, we couldn't, it didn't work. We did what you showed us to do. Yeah. And Jesus said, okay, but this kind can only come out through prayer and fasting. So he offered them a course correction there.
Yes.
So it was learning directly from him. And then it was doing ministry under his umbrella in his power. And then he was teaching them after they did that. Well, that's discipleship.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. And of course, you see that Paul continues that through the book of Acts. He has Barnabas and Timothy and Titus. And he wrote, and unfortunately, we have his letters he wrote to Timothy and Titus, where we see his course corrections, right? Pass these things on to faithful men. Yeah. So as I began to put those pieces together, I thought, well, here's our training manual on ministry. The book of Acts is a blueprint for church planting. Yeah. Timothy, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, this is our pastoral. This is what you need to be a pastor. And of course, we have a lot of other passages we can pull from. That's all the School of Ministry is we've taken this from, the goal is that people who feel a calling to any kind of ministry within the church, this is specifically leadership, then they come into that, they sign up for the class. There is an application. If they're accepted into the class, then we begin training. We meet on Wednesday nights for 2 hours. They get all their materials. Mostly their book is mostly just the Bible, but I have other books I have them read.
Sure, yeah, helpful books.
Yeah, my favorite is Bob Goff.
Oh, really?
Oh,
yeah.
man, I love the guy. I love the guy.
That's his main one.
Everybody always, Love Does, Undistracted. He's got several books out. Love them all.
Yeah, he seems like a nice guy. I wonder, is he still alive?
Yeah, in fact, I called him.
Whoa.
He put his number. So the number in the back of the book is legit.
Oh, really?
And he answers the phone. He answers the phone. Yeah. Nice. I was with Danny Hodges, and Danny said, he looks at me, he says, let's call it. So he did, and we talked to him.
Like, is this Bob? Yeah. Is this a real Bob?
When he answered, we didn't know what to say. We were like, hey, he's like, we wanted to have something brilliant or something great.
I'm about to sit down for dinner. What do you want?
He said, well, we didn't expect you to answer. But yeah, so they work on that. We also, if you look through the criteria of leadership from 1 Timothy chapter 3. Most everything has to do with character except for one thing that he puts in there is the ability to teach. Yeah. And so what we do is each week, each student is assigned a specific passage of the Bible every week. Mm-hmm. They come in, they teach it to, we break the class up into groups. They teach it to other members of their group. Mm-hmm. And then everybody receives one thing they did well and one thing they need to work on. Yeah. So mostly what we work on is communication.
Do you do just men or men and women?
Men and women.
Okay.
Yeah. And well, we didn't in the beginning, but of course we have women's ministries within the church.
Sure.
We have.
These are tools. It's not just for pastoral. It's not a school of pastoral ministry. It's just all across the board ministry. Right.
But, our women's ministry leader here, her name is Debbie Andrews. Mm-hmm. She went through school of ministry and she teaches Bible studies in the church. And the question I always kind of thought, ask myself is why shouldn't she have the same level of, shouldn't she have the same opportunity to learn how to communicate as everybody else? So
to get that, hone that talent and gift.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times too, when we have church planners, when they go out, we all know that the pastor's wife is not a position in the church, but it's very much portrayed. It's very much seen as one.
Yeah.
And when the pastor goes out, especially when the church is small and there's nobody, you are everything.
Everything.
And so your wife is probably the worship leader, the children's ministry leader, and the women's ministry director,
and everything else. Yeah.
So the more equipping she can get before going out, the better, right, for both of them.
Yeah, totally. Well, I love it. I love the idea of a school of ministry. And is that a certain length of commitment? Like, how long do they do that for?
Minimum 1 year.
Okay, so they're once a week, 1 year, or do you take breaks during the year, or you're just
one break? So it's 2 semesters. Okay. Each one is 16 weeks.
Oh wow! And so for 16 weeks, you have committed yourself for 2 hours on a Wednesday to teach these guys.
Me personally, yes.
You and the other pastors?
I bring in other pastors.
Okay.
Yeah, guys like Jim Gallagher's been over here. Okay. And a guy named Brian Kelly that can come down and teach.
He's 1 hour away.
Hey, just an hour away. But bringing in other pastors so they're not just hearing from me all the time.
So you'll have a guest come in on a Wednesday and do
it's from time to time. Yes. Yeah. Aaron first come up from Naples, and we've had a lot of other guys here.
Very cool, man. Time has flown by. Thanks so much for being on the episode and for what you're doing here. And for anybody that can come visit Florida, come see Aaron. Come see us in Bradenton, but come see Aaron. He's a few years in front of us, but God's really blessed the church here. I'm really impressed and proud of what you've done, and glad that we get to minister in the same area.
Me too.
And we need to do more of it. So keep planting those churches, training those young men and women, and we'll do the same for the gospel. And great to be part of Calvary Chapel and what the Lord is doing in this day and age. It's not just the hippies.
No.
That get revivals.
It's nerds like me. Yes. We all get it now.
It is. It's nerds like us. Nerd that doesn't know how to use a fax machine. Yeah. You can't be a nerd if you don't know how to use a computer or a fax machine. Okay.
Maybe I'm just a really bad nerd.
Yeah, you're a bad nerd. Nice. Yeah. Well, thanks again, Aaron, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. The Cultivate Church Planting Podcast is part of CGN Media, a podcast network that points to Christ. Check out cgnmedia.org for more great shows and ways to support the ministry.